Hi, this is Andrea Hendricks, and the topic of this video is applications of quadratic equations. With these applications, we're going to try to write a quadratic equation that represents the problem and solve it using factoring. The first type of problem we're going to look at is a geometric application. Here we have the length of a video cassette shell is 3 inches more than its width. The area of the rectangular top side of the shell is 28 square inches. Find the length and width of the video cassette shell. It's helpful if you can draw a picture and represent on the picture the things that you know. We know that the length is 3 more than the width. So if we let W be the width, the length would have to be 3 more than that, which is W plus 3. We also know that the area of that is 28 square inches. Well, remember, area of a rectangle is length times width. So to get our equation, we're going to have to multiply W times W plus 3 and set that equal to the area, which is 28. Now this is a quadratic equation, not in standard form, right? Because we have a product there, but it's not equal to 0. So we'd have to multiply that out to get W squared plus 3W is equal to 28. Then we can subtract 28 to get 3, or W squared plus 3W minus 28 is equal to 0. And then we need to factor. So since that's a trinomial, we know we have to come up with two binomial factors. The factors of W squared are W and W. The factors of 28, whose difference is 3, would be 7 and 4. Because we have a difference at the end, the signs are different, and the larger one is positive. So therefore, we know that W plus 7 is equal to 0, or W minus 4 is equal to 0. We get as our possible answers negative 7 or 4. Now with application problems, we can't just leave it at negative 7 and 4 our answers, because one of those answers may not even make sense. If we're trying to find the length and width of the video cassette shell, would it make sense for the width to be negative 7? No, so we discard that answer. But it does make sense for it to be 4. So that would tell us the width is 4 inches, and the length is 3 more than that, which is 7 inches. Okay. Another example involves consecutive integers. Consecutive integers are numbers like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They just follow one right after the other. They're unknown in this case, so we're going to have to represent them using variables, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But we have the product of two consecutive integers is 4 less than 4 times their sum. Find the integers. So the first thing we need to do is set up variables to represent that. Well, we always let x be one of our unknowns, right? So it's going to be one of the integers. Well, the next consecutive one is going to be x plus 1, right? If I think about 3, 4, and 5, how do I go from 3 to 4? I have to add 1 to it. Now, the key to this problem is using translations to set it up. We have the product of two consecutive integers is, so there's our equal sign. What comes before it is on the left side, what comes after is on the right. On the left side is the product of two consecutive integers, which is x times x plus 1 is 4 less than, so that means to subtract 4 from something, 4 times their sum. So we have to do 4 times the sum of these integers, which is x plus 1. So on the left, we're going to multiply to get x squared plus x is equal to 4 times, combining inside parentheses, that is 2x plus 1 minus 4. So we really have x squared plus x is equal to 8x plus 4 minus 4. We get x squared plus x is equal to 8x because the 4's add to 0. Now we can set it equal to 0 by subtracting 8x from both sides. So that gives us x squared minus 7x is equal to 0. So we get x times x minus 7 is equal to 0. So that tells us either x is 0 or x minus 7 is 0. So we get x is equal to 0 or x is equal to 7. Well, there's no reason to exclude either one of these. We didn't know if they were positive or negative or anything like that, so both of the answers are acceptable. So we really have two pair of numbers that are going to work. So if x is 0, the next consecutive integer would be 1. So either 0 and 1 would be the integers, or 7 and 8, okay, would work. The next applications deal with Pythagorean Theorem, and I just wanted to review that with you. Do you remember Pythagorean Theorem deals with how the sides of a right triangle relate, with a right triangle being one of the angles is 90 degrees. The sides around that are called the legs of the right triangle, and the side opposite the right angle is the hypotenuse. And if we label these as A, B, and C, the relationship that always holds true is that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So let's look at how we can apply that to these problems. Here's one that says the hypotenuse of a right triangle is 1 centimeter longer than the longer leg. The shorter leg is 7 centimeters shorter than the longer leg. Find the length of the longer leg of the triangle. So the first thing to do is to draw a triangle and label the things that you know. So the hypotenuse is 1 centimeter longer than the longer leg. So if we let x be the longer leg, the hypotenuse of that is going to be 1 more than that, which is x plus 1. The shorter leg is 7 centimeters shorter than the longer leg. Well, if x is the longer leg, 7 shorter than that would be x minus 7. So since we have each side labeled, we can now put it in the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. A and b are the legs. It doesn't really matter which one you use for which, but we'll put x squared plus x minus 7 squared is equal to x plus 1 squared. I get a lot of mistakes here because of forgetting how to square a binomial. But remember here we get x squared plus x minus 7 squared is a trinomial. When we multiply it out, we would get x squared minus 14x plus 49. And that's equal to x plus 1 squared, which is x squared plus 2x plus 1. So now we need to combine like terms and such and set it equal to 0. X squared plus x squared is 2x squared. Another common mistake I see for that is that's x to the 4th, but that only happens if you multiply those terms. So we get 2x squared minus 14x plus 49 is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1. Now we need to set one side of that equation equal to 0, so we need to remove all the terms from one side. So we could subtract the x squared, subtract 2x, and subtract 1. So that gives us x squared minus 16x plus, what is that, 48 is equal to 0. So now our job is to try to find the factors of 48, whose sum is 16. Well, and if we look at the factors of 48, we have 1 and 48, 2 and 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, right, and 6 and 8. Well, 4 and 12 have a sum of 16, so we would put those numbers here. And since we have the sum here, we have the same signs, both of them being negative. So that tells us that x minus 4 is equal to 0, or x minus 12 is equal to 0. So our possible answers are 4 or 12. Now both of these answers are positive, so you may think, well, I can't discard either one of them. But if I look at how I would have to find the other sides, if x was 4, this would be 4, but 4 minus 7 would be negative, so it wouldn't make sense to have that value being the longer leg. So it must be 12. Let's check. If x is 12, then 12 minus 7 is 5, and 12 plus 1 is 13, so all of those give me positive values, so 12 would be the answer. And the length of the longer leg, well, x represented the longer leg, so we would say the longer leg is 12 centimeters. Okay. Here's another application of Pythagorean Theorem. We have a ladder that's leaning against a building, so here's my building, and here's my ladder. The distance from the bottom of the ladder to the building, which is this distance here, and notice that makes a right triangle. The distance from the bottom of the ladder to the building is 4 feet less than the length of the ladder. So if the length of our ladder is x, this would have to be 4 less than that, which is x minus 4. It says how high up the side of the building is the top of the ladder if that distance is 2 feet less than the length of the ladder. So this distance here is going to be x minus 2. So putting it in terms of the Pythagorean theorem, okay, notice our x is our hypotenuse, so that's always a value of c. We would have x minus 4 squared plus x minus 2 squared is equal to x squared. So squaring x minus 4 gives us x squared minus 8x plus 16, plus squaring x minus 2 is x squared minus 4x plus 4, and that's equal to x squared. So we get here 2x squared minus 8x minus 4x is minus 12x. 16 plus 4 is plus 20, and that's equal to x squared. So we set it to 0 by subtracting x squared. So we would get x squared minus 12x plus 20 is equal to 0. So now we need to factor x squared and x squared is x and x, or x squared is x and x. The factors of 20 whose sum is 12. Would be 10 and 2. I'm sorry, just had a moment where I couldn't think. And both signs are the same, which they're both negative. So that would tell us that either x minus 10 is 0 or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So x is 10 or x is 2. Okay. If it's 2, 2 minus 2 would be 0, and 2 minus 4 would be a negative 2, so it can't be 2. So it has to be 10. So this x value would be 10. 10 minus 4 would be 6, and 10 minus 2 is 8. And what do we have to answer? We had to say how high up the side of the building is the top of the ladder if that distance is 2 feet less than the length of the ladder. So the how high up it would be 8 feet. Okay. The last type of application deals with the height of an object. It says an object propelled from a height of 48 feet with an initial velocity of 32 feet per second after t seconds has a height given by h is equal to negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 48. After how many seconds is the height 64 feet? So after how many seconds, that means we're trying to find t, but we know the height is 64. So we're simply going to plug into this equation the value of 64 for h, and then solve for t. So we need to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to add 16t squared, subtract the 32t, and subtract 48. So if we subtract 48 from 64, we get 16. And that's equal to 0. Well, these numbers are quite large, so you may notice that 16 divides evenly into everything. So if we divide all of those by 16, we actually get t squared minus 2t plus 1 is equal to 0. And if we factor that, we'd have t and t. This factors of 1 whose sum is 2 is 1 and 1, both signs being negative. So since those are the same factor, we get just a repeated solution of t minus 1 is equal to 0, or t is equal to 1. So that tells us in 1 second, the height of the object is going to be 64 feet. The next question is, after how many seconds does the object hit the ground? Well, to hit the ground means the height is 0. And so what we would do there is just plug in 0 for h and solve the equation that results. Again, we can set it equal, well, it is set equal to 0, but if we don't like the negative sign there, we could multiply everything through by -1 to get 16t squared minus 32t minus 48. But here again, 16 goes into everything evenly. So if we divide by 16, we get the equation 0 is equal to t squared minus 2t minus 3. So to factor that, we would find the factors of the 3, whose difference is 2, which is 3 and 1. Different signs, large one being negative, so we have t minus 3 and t plus 1. So we either get t minus 3 is equal to 0, or t plus 1 is equal to 0. So t would be equal to 3, or t is equal to -1. Okay? So it doesn't make sense to talk about a -1 second. So in 3 seconds, we have the object hitting the ground. And that concludes this lesson. So if you have any questions, please contact me. Hello? Hey. Yeah, I was on my last slide videotaping. That's fine. I'll just be a phone ring on that one. Uh-huh. Okay, what is her LSM score? Battery's low. Todd, what's her LSM score? Well, that's saying it's required.